Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying the prophet Jeremiah, that's Yirmiyahu, chapter 40, as we continue to recount the events that occurred at the time of the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, at the end of the reign of the final king of the Davidic line, Tzidkiyahu. We just read in chapter 39 of the fall of the city of Jerusalem, how the king was taken into exile, his sons slaughtered by the Babylonian conquerors, the nobility slaughtered, that all the upper classes were and landowners, priesthood, and so on were all taken and sent into exile in Babylon. We also learned that the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had given explicit instructions to take care of Jeremiah, to take care of Yirmiyahu the prophet, not to harm him, and to give him the choice of where to go. We learned briefly last time that Jeremiah chose to remain in Jerusalem with Gedaliah. We'll talk a little bit more about Gedaliah in this chapter, or Gedaliahu. Rather than to go into exile. We're going to learn more details about the process of that decision in this chapter 40, that decision that was placed before Jeremiah as to where to go and why he decided to stay with Gedaliah. Gedaliah was not a member of the Judean royal line, not a descendant of King David. But he was placed as governor over the remaining Jews in Judea. If you remember from last chapter, the poorer classes, the ones who had been not the landowners, but the poor, the destitute, the enslaved ones, they were now freed by the Babylonian conquerors and were each given land, vineyards, fields, that had previously been owned by the upper classes that had oppressed them, and settled down in the Judean towns, and Gedaliah was appointed as their governor. So there's still a Jewish presence in Judea, even though most of the people had been exiled to Babylon. And as one can imagine, there was scattered among the hills and scattered among the towns and the mountains and the valleys and so on, bands of people that had escaped the Babylonian conquerors, some that had escaped to some of the neighboring countries. And the news started to spread to all of these people that there's something going on in Judea. There's a leader, there's Gedaliah, there's people, they're starting to farm, they're starting to build homes. Maybe there's some hope for a presence of the Jewish nation in Jerusalem and in Judea. So let's study that today. 40. Let's start with chapter 40, verse 1. Hadavor asher haya el Yirmiyahu me'et Adonai. The word which came to Jeremiah from God, as follows. And when did this word come? Achar shalach oto Nebuzaradan rav tabochim min harama. After Nebuzaradan, who was the second in command to the king, he was the head of the king's royal guard, and he had been instructed specifically by the king to make sure that Jeremiah was treated properly and kept safe. So he came down from and this word of God came to Jeremiah after Nebuzaradan set him free. Bekachto also, when this Nebuzaradan set Jeremiah free, because as you can imagine, when the soldiers came and they found Jeremiah, who was at the time of the capture of Jerusalem, he was still imprisoned in the prison yard. So they had taken him and put him in chains together with all the other Judean captives. But Nebuzaradan v'hu asur bazikim betoch kol golus Yerushalayim b'Yehuda, he was in chains in captivity with the rest of the exilees, the rest of the people who were being exiled from Jerusalem and from Judah, Hamugalim Bavela, who were on their way to be taken into captive towards Babylon. But Nebuzaradan freed him, and at some point after that, God spoke to Jeremiah. Now, we're going to go off topic for a minute, and we're not going to hear the prophecy that God actually spoke to Jeremiah until several chapters from now, in chapter 42. But rather, we're going to discuss in more detail what occurred when Nebuzaradan freed Jeremiah. So we just set up the situation. Jeremiah is captive; he's in chains. Nebuzaradan sends his messengers and comes to Jeremiah and takes him out of chains and brings Jeremiah before Nebuzaradan, who is one of the highest-ranking officers in the Babylonian army. Verse 2, Vayikach Rav Tabochim Lirmiyahu, and this is what happened. The head of the king's guard, Nebuzaradan, took Jeremiah, Vayomer Elav, and he said to him as follows. It is evident from these next several verses that the higher-ups in the Babylonian army were very well aware that Jeremiah had been prophesying the victory of the Babylonians over Jerusalem and had been counseling the king to remain subservient to Babylon, and they therefore understood that Jeremiah's prophecies and why the city of Jerusalem fell, and we'll see that now. So Vayomer Elav, Nebuzaradan said to Jeremiah, Adonai Elohecha, your God, the Lord your God, Diber et hazos. He had predicted this evil that had befallen your people, El Makom Hazeh, regarding this place of Jerusalem. Vayavo, and he came, your God came, Vayas Adonai kasher Diber, and God did exactly as he spoke. Because we know that you predicted it, we know that you spoke about it, and we know that it happened. And that the reason is, Ki chatosem la'Adonai v'lo shmatem b'kolo, because your people sinned to God and did not listen to him. And that's why this thing happened to you and your people. And now, I have just removed your chains, asher al yadecha, which were chaining your hands. And now I'm going to give you a choice. If what you desire is to come with me to Babylon, together with all of the people that are being exiled now, all of the captives that we're bringing to Babylon, then come, and I will watch over you and take care of you, and I'll make sure you're fine, and you'll live a fine life in Babylon. But if you do not want to come to me with Babylon, then don't. Then you don't have to come. Look, the whole land, the war is over. You can stay here with the remnants of the people that are here. And that could be your choice. Wherever you decide to go, wherever you want to go, that's where you should go. You have a free pass. Pick a place to go, and we support your decision, and we will make sure that you do not get harmed. V'odenu lo yashuv. Before, we know that Jeremiah's ultimate decision was to stay with the people who were still in Judea. But before he turned to leave the presence of Nebuzaradan, this high officer, Veshuva Gedaliah and Achikam ben Shaphan, and to return to stay with Gedaliah, who the son of Achikam, the son of Shaphan, Asher Ifkid Melech Bavel bar Yehuda, the one who had been appointed as the governor of the cities of Judah by the king of Babylon, V'shevi to b'toch ha'am. I missed a little bit in the translation here. V'odenu lo yashuv, before he turned to go, because he saw, it was evident that Gedaliah did not want to continue with him onto Babylon, but wanted to return. He said to him that if you do go back to Judea, go back to Veshuva, return to Gedaliah ben Achikam, go back to Gedaliah, because he is the one who the king of Babylon appointed over the cities of Judah. V'shevi to b'toch ha'am, stay with him, with the rest of the nation. You can be a good source of guidance, you can be a good source of leadership, a good source of teaching for the people that remain. El kol hayasher beinecha. That's my advice, but you don't have to listen. You can do whatever it is that you want to, wherever you want to go. If you want to go off to a mountaintop, fine. If you want to go back to the people, fine. You want to come to Babylon, fine. So he gave him supplies, he gave him food, he gave him what he needed to travel, so that he should be able to make it to his destination. And then Vayavo Yirmiyahu el Gedaliah ben Achikam hamitzpata. Yirmiyahu chose to go to the governor that had newly been appointed over the remaining people in Judea, Gedaliah ben Achikam, who set up his offices in Mitzpah, which is north of Jerusalem. Vayeshev ito b'toch ha'am, and he stayed with him among the remainder of the nation Hanisharim ba'aretz who had remained in the land. Just one thing that's, I think, important to remember, that this Gedaliah ben Achikam was the son of Achikam, obviously, that was his father's name, and he was a person whom we are familiar with. He was back in Jeremiah 26, when Jeremiah was prophesying in the temple, and the people wanted to hurt him, and it was Achikam ben Shaphan who saved him from the crowd. So we know that this family was a family that was loyal to Jeremiah and his teachings for all the way back from the beginning. Gedaliah, it is assumed, was appointed by and this is Rashi's explanation, and it makes a lot of sense, that Gedaliah, it is assumed, was someone who, during the siege, listened to Jeremiah's advice and surrendered to the Babylonians and left the city, rather than stay in the city and get killed with the people that ended up getting killed during the fall of Jerusalem. And therefore, Gedaliah had already demonstrated to the Babylonians that he would be loyal to them, and he was therefore the logical person to make as governor of the remaining people in the land. So now we have the beginnings of a new life. And as you can imagine, after a war of this magnitude, there are many groups of soldiers that escaped into the fields, escaped into the mountains, escaped to the neighboring countries. There are families that are running refugees in all sorts of places, and people, the news starts to spread that there's a governor. The Babylonians are giving out land and homes to people in the previous towns of Judea. Something is starting to brew. People are starting to come back. There's maybe some hope for a future here. So Vayishmu called, this is verse 7, Kol Soreha Chayalim Asher Basada, all of the officers of the soldiers that had escaped, the little roving bands of ex-Judean soldiers who appointed themselves leaders, they were probably some of them might have been hoping that Tzidkiyahu would somehow hold out, or somehow escape the Babylonians and set up a new camp, and they would rejoin. Or maybe these were people that had surrendered to the Babylonians and are now just wandering around Judea. Heima v'ansheim, they and all their men heard ki ifgid melech Bavel et Gedaliah ben Achikam ba'aretz, that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah as a governor over the land. And that not only that, but there were families, there were men, women, and children, and families, and from the poor people of the land, from those that had not been exiled to Babylon. So there were Judeans, there were Jews still there, and there was a semblance of leadership starting to build up. So Vayavo el Gedaliah al Mitzpah, they all came to Gedaliah, to Mitzpah, where he had set up his government. Some of these people that came had the following names: V'Yishmael ben Netanyahu, V'Yochanan, V'Yonatan b'nei Kareach, Usiraya ben Tanchumet, Uv'nei Ephai hanetofati, V'Zanyahu ben Hamachati, Hema v'Yansheam. These are some of the groups. I don't need to translate all these names. These are names of different the leaders of the different groups of people and bands of people that started coming to Mitzpah, to Gedaliah's new government, to join this reforming group of Judeans who are now trying to get things going again. At this point, Gedaliah makes it very, very clear what his intention is, because among these people are a mix. Some are people who probably did not want to capitulate to the Babylonians and wanted to fight and somehow escaped into the mountains. Some are those who from the beginning wanted to listen to Jeremiah's advice, and Gedaliah himself was one of those, and wanted to be subservient to the Babylonians because they knew they weren't strong enough and they knew they weren't deserving of independence, complete independence, and they were hoping to live in peace with the Babylonians until the time God decides they are ready and they would merit living independently again with their own king. So Gedaliah, as the new governor, makes it very clear to all of the bands of people that join as follows. He swears to them as follows, Ulan and to all the men, Lamar, saying, Al tir'u me'avor akastim, don't be afraid to be subservient to the Chaldeans. Shavu ba'aretz, let's live in the land, we can build homes, we can farm the land, Ivdu et melech Bavel v'yitav lachem, and we can be subservient to the king of Babylon, and it will work out well for you. Just do it. I don't want to hear about rebellions anymore. I don't want to hear about fighting anymore. It's over. It's done. They won. We lost. Let's accept it, and let's start to build something. Ba'ani, I will stay here in Mitzpah la'amod lifnei akastim in order to be, to conduct my political activities and leadership with the Chaldeans, who are now our masters. Asher yavo eleinu, they were going to have messengers coming back and forth from Babylon, giving us instructions, taxes, laws, rules, whatever it is. Asher yavo eleinu, I'll take care of the political business. V'atem, it's your job. Get going on living. Isviyayin, start to gather wine, v'kayetz, and figs, v'shemen, and oil, v'simu, v'chlechem, start to fill your storehouses, u'shvu ba'arechem asher tefastem, and start to live and settle down in the cities which you have now occupied. Remember, he's talking mostly to the poor people who were landless and homeless, but now the homes and the fields that were owned by the rich people that used to oppress them are now open. Settle them. Start settling them. Let's start rebuilding. The Gamkol, and there were also Jews who had been Judeans who had been scattered into surrounding countries that ran to try to save themselves by running to other countries, such as Gamkol Yudim, also all of the Judeans Asher Moab that had run to Moab, Uvnei Ammon, and to Ammon, Uve Edom. These are the countries that surrounded Judea. Asher B'chol Haratzos, and in all the other lands, Shamu, they heard, Kinatan Melech Bavel Sheretz Lihuda, that the king of Babylon did leave a remnant in Judah, and that he appointed over this remnant at Gedaliah ben Achikam ben Shaphan. So they started coming back too. Vayashuvu chol haYehudim mikol hamakomot asher nidchu sham. The Judeans who had been scattered in all of those places where they had fled to started to return. Vayavohu eretz Yehuda al Gedaliah hamitzpata. And they came to the land of Judah to Gedaliah, who was in Mitzpah, via Asu Yayin, and they were able to gather a lot of wine, vakayets and figs, harbe ma'od. So they had food, and they started to build a society with Gedaliah as their leader. However, unfortunately, it seems like now we have a potential for a future. Things are looking bright. However, jealousy and intrigue and backstabbing, unfortunately, is about to tear the people apart. And it didn't take long before one of the bands, one of people that were scattered about, one of the bands of Jewish soldiers that were scattered about, did not like Gedaliah's leadership. They did not like his philosophy and his ideas of subservience to the Babylonians. And that was led by Yishmael ben Netanya. This Yishmael had met with the king of Ammon. The king of Ammon, as we know from the previous chapters, had kind of double-timed and cheated out Tzidkiyahu. He had told Tzidkiyahu that he was going to be his ally in a great alliance against the Babylonians. But then when the Babylonians attacked, he switched side to the Babylonians and participated in the attack against Jerusalem. So he's a guy who we know is not a very trustworthy king. But now he sees Judea starting to rise again. He was so happy that the Babylonians finally destroyed his old enemies, the people of Jerusalem. He sees it starting to come up again. So he secretly forms an alliance with the head of one of the bands, Ishmael, and says, no, let's get rid of Gedaliah so you and I together can challenge Babylon again. This was done in secret. However, some of the other heads of the bands who were loyal to Gedaliah, who heard about this alliance, and tried to warn Gedaliah that Ishmael was out to get him. So we're about to learn that story. So V'Yochanan ben Kareach v'chol soreach hayalim asher basad ba'u el Gedaliah hamitzpata. Yochanan the son of Kareach and all of the other officers that were out there in the fields, now not engaging anymore in war, but now engaging in farming and building and so on, they came to Gedaliah, who was in his offices in Mitzpah, and they warned him of this plot. Vayomer elav, Hayadoa teida, do you know? Ki Baalis, the king, Melech b'nei Ammon, his name was Baalis, the king of the Ammonites, Sholach et Yishmael ben Netanya, he sent Yishmael, the son of Netanya, lahakot chonafesh, to assassinate you. He's going to assassinate you. Watch out for that guy. He's acting like he's loyal, but his intention is to assassinate you and to form some kind of alliance with Ammon. But Gedaliah could not believe that after all that we've been through, there's still someone who is about to ruin the last hope of survival of the people of Judea in their land. Yochanan ben Kareach Omer al Gedaliah b'Seiser. So Yochanan ben Kareach told Gedaliah in secret, b'Mitzpah, in Mitzpah Lamar, as follows: I'll take care of it for you. El Chanavi Haket Yishmael ben Netanya. Let me go and kill him before he kills you. Ish lo yeda. No one will know. I'll kill him when no one's looking. No one will know. And then he answered, Gedaliah wouldn't hear of it. Lama yakek on nefesh. Why should you? I'm sorry. These are the words of Yochanan ben Kareach. Let me get rid of you, this Yishmael, who is conspiring to ruin everything that we're trying to build here. Why should we allow him to stay alive, and then he'll end up killing you? And what we all know what'll happen is you're the last hope. If you get killed, then v'nafotzu kol Yehuda nikpatzim alacha v'avda sheres Yehuda, the last remnant of Judah, and all of this, the refugees of Judah who have gathered themselves under you as their leader. If you're gone, the whole thing is going to fall apart. People are going to scatter everywhere. Vayomer Gedaliah ben Achikam, Gedaliah's response to El Yochanan ben Kareach, Yochanan was, Al ta'aseh es hadavar hazeh, don't kill Yishmael, ki sheker atador al Yishmael. You are speaking falsehood. This is not true. Gedaliah refused to believe that even at this point, someone would still be willing to carry out an assassination and plot against the last final hope for a Judean presence in Judea. Of course, we know, and we're going to read in the next chapter about what really happened. Had Gedaliah at least taken his advice and been careful regarding Ishmael, history may have turned out differently. However, Gedaliah was somewhat, we would call him today, naive. It reminds me very much of the famous quote from Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. If you really think Ishmael is okay, fine, but at least call him in and find out and do an investigation or something to find out if it indeed these accusations are true. And had he done that, he may actually have found that Ishmael really was conspiring to kill him and could have done something to protect himself. However, Gedaliah trusted, but didn't verify. He just trusted. And in a way, this is somewhat of a compliment that he refused to believe bad things. But we have to understand the lesson here that, yes, it's nice and it's important to trust people, but it's also important to make sure that when something so important is at stake, it's also important to be careful and put in place proper precautions. We're going to learn about the tragic assassination of Gedaliah very soon in the next chapter. This ends chapter 40. Thank you so much for studying chapter 40 together. Looking forward to studying chapter 41 together as well, and of course the rest of the book of Jeremiah.